all this AI stuff has hit the news. It's really impressive, and we're like right in the middle of designing and building a CS degree. And so a lot of the question that like naturally arises is like, okay, well, what should you do about this? How should we respond to the fact that this AI stuff is totally changing how a lot of software engineers write their code, what a lot of code is likely to look like in the future, which kinds of things that students learn are going to be important, and also, what tools are available to us as teachers, as curriculum designers for building the learning experiences for students.
Hey, you found Ways We Learn, an investigation of how learning happens across all ages and modalities. Let's go learn something. Hi, folks. Welcome back to Ways We Learn. I'm Sean. I'm here with Brian and Joe. And if you recall, we talked about AI as early as the second episode of this show. And it's a topic that we're going to keep coming back to. It's so central to the education landscape today. And it's something that all of us are really interested in, just personally and professionally. And so we were very, very excited when our friend Rob Cobb reached out to us about the work he's doing and how he's thinking about AI in education these days. So all three of us have worked professionally with Rob back when we were all at Flatiron School. He was an instructor there. He was also a member of my team of instructor trainers. And Brian, I think he was on your team, right? And at some point in curricular design. And we also know him as a great thinker and practitioner about education, as well as a superstar programmer and a software developer. And Rob has worked for more than a decade in high-tech education, including a stint, in addition to Flatiron, at one of Brian's startups, which is called Schoolhouse. And so if you look at Rob's resume, it's really well balanced between building software and building educational experiences, which is just awesome, I think. And so most recently, Rob co-founded Kibo School, which is an affordable online bachelor's degree in computer science for students in Africa. And you can always find him writing about teaching and about boot camps on Substack. He's at csed.substack.com. We'll put that link in the episode notes. And Rob, just welcome to Ways We Learn. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Sean. It's so great to be here and see all of your faces again.
Yeah, it's great to hang out again. So let's just start with your background and where you came from in computer science and in development and where you've gotten to, and we'll go into your current venture after that.
Sure. So as you said, I bounced back and forth between working on software as a software engineer and then teaching about software, either as an instructor or on the teacher training team or working on curriculum. So thinking about how do students learn coding best? I think a lot of software engineers, maybe because of the sort of directness with which we approach abstractions, and we talk about abstractions a lot. I think a lot of software engineers get interested in this question of how do we code better? How do we teach code better? And I guess my journey into that started pretty early. I took a freshman intro to CS class that was really bad. It was just like very boring, very slow, didn't let us do anything that we cared about. I like failed an interview, like just like a very basic interview, like for a internship. And it was like, man, I had this whole course on software and why can't I do this very basic thing? It seems so like it should be so easy. And so a lot of my time since then has been wondering about these questions. How do we make computer science education more empowering for students so that they can do more, they get more power sooner and faster in their careers, as well as have a deeper understanding of all of these things. I took a few education classes when I was at University of Maryland, and I guess the big impression that I'd gotten. So I'd been working at a tech summer camp, and one of the things that I learned very quickly was that there's a whole set of skills and knowledge that is there to be had in education. And I think I had maybe as a youth, as a 19-year-old, brushed off like, oh, those people don't know anything, and then I sort of got into it and I was like, oh, wow, they know a lot.
There's a whole field here.
There's a whole field here. There's a lot of knowledge about the particulars of how people learn and what you can do as someone in that instructor, coach, or trainer or camp counselor role to make that learning go better.
I forgot, Robbie, you worked at the same summer camp I worked at.
right?
Were
We
you
both
also at
worked at
Tick?
Tick.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both worked at Tick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
no way.
That's so funny.
I remember that
Mhm.
fact. That's funny. Yeah.
Tick is a big it's like very big in teaching logo and like sort of all in like
Yeah.
Papert.
Yeah.
So like this, I don't know, very influential book to me was this
Yeah.
book Mindstorms,
Yeah.
which is like 1981, and highly recommend. Still holds up. A lot about like how programming can put the learner at the center of their education rather than having them be sort of passive and a consumer of especially the goals of like what the point of education is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you said it's influential for you, not just you, but I mean, that has become one of the central pieces, the idea of constructionism that Pepper came up with in computer science education.
For sure.
We didn't use logo, we used star logo, which is a derivative of logo when we were teaching computer science at Riverdale in the 2000s and 2010s. So this has definitely stuck around.
For sure.
So, all right, bring us up to date. So now you have co-founded Kibo School. So tell us about that and tell us what makes this place unique and interesting.
Yes. So Kibo, we're an online university for students in Africa. We're trying to be an affordable education that offers something that that otherwise students don't have access to. So I think that there's a bunch of different problems that students face as they're trying to get sort of into the job market, launch their career, and we're trying to help students tackle that. So we offer one bachelor's degree in computer science. It's an accredited program, which I think at different times each of you had some experience and exposure to the accreditation process. It's
not a small deal.
It's a lot of paperwork.
It's nuts. Can't believe
accreditation is one sort of boon for students. But then a lot of what we're focused on is giving students practical experience very early in their degree, so that they can feel the relevance of each of their classes. It doesn't just feel like something that, well, I'm doing it because the teacher told me to. They're sort of put in that driver's seat, and we still have a lot of required assignments so that students that we know that they're learning and that they know that they're learning, and so that they can get that feedback. But the point of why we're doing this assignment is clear to students the whole time. There's a couple other things that we're sort of baking into the model. One of them is a peer learning model that's still friendly to remote instruction. So we have this phrase that we keep going back to: online but not alone. So the academic program is delivered online. So we have Zoom classes and we have lecture, notes and materials that students access on their laptops or on their phones. We've also got students who are based locally in a particular set of cities. Right now, Africa for us means Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya. That's sort of where we're starting. And students get the chance to meet up with other students in their city for local events. So even if their instructor is in Turkey, they're still able to build those in-person relationships and feel like they're part of a community. So I think that there's still a lot for us to learn about how to do peer learning really effectively, but that's another sort of central part of our model.
Thinkful ran that model exceedingly well, where they would have some sort of a community manager in an area.
We're drawing a lot of what sort of the design of the program from sort of trying to bring together the best of what we know of the bootcamp world and the higher ed CS program.
And it's a 3-year program that Kibo's running, right? It's a 3-year bachelor's.
Yeah, it's a 3-year bachelor's degree. So we get to go much deeper than I think a lot of the boot camps, which tend to be between 12 weeks and a year. So students get to get a lot of that like software dev, just like building apps and websites, but then also get a lot more CS theory. So it's a better launch pad for their career in the long term. Their trajectory they can sort of go further because they've got that stronger foundation.
Nice. And I love the focus, like you said, it's so much on student motivation and relevance. And that's something that we know is like critical for adult learners, and that's fantastic because so much of computer science in the past has been, okay, let's learn this next big heavy book, and yeah, that's what chased me out of computer science actually. I
Yeah.
thought about doing it.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that boot camps do really well is they like
Right.
bring you into contact with real world problems really, really fast. So the we're trying to bring that like immediate relevance into this higher ed kind of context.
What have you learned?
Learned a ton.
Broad question.
Yeah, one, start everything very early. It takes a long time to get things done. So that's one thing for sure. I think a lot of the things that we've learned, I think we had a lot of assumptions about what was going to be hard and what was going to be easy, and some of those things have tracked, that have been roughly correct. But I think a lot of things that we underrated were things around things like the infrastructure that students have and their context. So students are cross-pressured in a bunch of ways. They have a bunch of time constraints that just like, one of the things that it's like, I probably could have known this. We could have known this better, but so for some students, the commute is very long and difficult. And so if they want to go and work like not in their home where they're located, then it's like, well, I've got to weigh, do I want to go and spend 2 hours on a bus? And it's like, geez,
Right, wow.
that's hard. It's compounded by it, in their home. The power and data issues are pretty frequent. It's like all students have some access to data and power, but it can be intermittent. And so it's sort of, it's hard to join your Zoom class if you don't have power. There's a lot of like very predictable, but still, they're highly relevant issues for our students. So we've got a couple of bets that we've made on sort of how we can help students solve those issues. One is that local support model, that community advisor who can help students navigate those issues and just think about like the context of their learning and their environment. So that's one thing. The other bet that we're making, we're opening a few physical learning spaces. We've opened our second one in sort of downtown Lagos, sort of. And the original conception of that was like, oh, well, it'll be a great place for this peer learning model where students will learn together. And we still believe that that's going to be, one impact of this space for students to make friends and build these relationships. But another, sort of maybe even more central win from having a physical space is just that students will have consistent access to the internet, consistent place to go to have power, so that they can actually focus on their studies and not on like, where do I go to charge my laptop?
Does that mean you're moving to a even more async model, given all those challenges?
We baked in a pretty async model from the beginning. There's like one live class per each of the courses that students are taking. There's one live class per week to try and keep the rhythm of the class going and moving.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're thinking a lot about how do we support specific interactions that work well, even if you're joining from your phone and not your laptop.
Right.
Or your laptop access is going to be, an hour or two after the class.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I don't know where people are who are listening to this right now, but it's the issue of equity and access is so huge in education, and to have it's such an important consideration that to make sure people have the access, make sure that they can actually get to the class on time if that's the issue, or whether they do it from home or in person. You call it the learning centers, the learning hubs. What was it?
Yeah, learning hubs.
Learning hub. So was the plan always to have a physical place for people to go?
Yeah, we had had the idea to have that. I mean, we've got a lot of ideas of things that we haven't been able to do yet. But this is always part of the plan, was to have some physical locations, event space, study space, and I think that's sort of climbing up our priority ladder to like create that access for more of our students.
Yeah. I was curious whether that was something that you had always thought would happen, or if that was something that was a response to the first year.
Yeah, there's sort of this balance in the description of the program, because like our instructors are not based all in the countries where our students are, and so the academic program is still primarily delivered remotely, but students might be co-located.
Mm. Yeah, I thought that was interesting on the website that it's saying we're accepting applications if you live within 100 kilometers of one of these learning hubs. So it's an online university with a geo fence almost.
Right.
It's kind of cool
Which
that way.
is, I think, actually like less of a constraint than at least I would have thought it was. Like we had this, I've heard, now that we've worked with a lot of online schools, they pretty much all operate within 50 miles of their home base.
Mm-hmm.
Like sure, they have, I don't know, 10, 20% of people who are greater than 50 miles from campus, but the vast majority are within 50 miles of campus, which is so weird.
I think, once you think about how students learn about the school, it starts to click. So for us, it's like we know where most of our students come from, and they come from referrals. It's like, oh, their friend told their aunt, and their aunt told them, and so a lot of it is partnerships with people in the local network. We have a couple of great partner organizations that have referred students to us before, and a lot of those are very like centrally based, and so they have it sort of makes sense like students would be from those places.
Yeah.
All right. So you reached out though because you were interested in talking about AI. I know that you're thinking about AI at Kibo. Can you tell us where that might go? What do you have in mind there?
Yeah, I guess the impetus is, so all this AI stuff has hit the news. It's really impressive. It seems like this is going to be a big deal, and we're like right in the middle of designing and building a CS degree, and so a lot of the question that like naturally arises is like, okay, well, what should you do about this? Like, what should we how should we respond to the fact that this AI stuff is totally changing how a lot of software engineers write their code, what a lot of code is likely to look like in the future, which kinds of things that students learn are going to be important, and also what tools are available to us as teachers, as curriculum designers for building the learning experiences for students. So I think I probably heard this from at least one of you before. This idea of like, well, if you want to go learn something, teach it, or write a blog post about it, or go on a podcast about it. So some of this is like, well, I'm not an expert in AI or how to teach with AI, but I have to be. I have to get there pretty soon, and so I should go on and talk about it with you guys.
Forced learning, nothing like it.
Exactly.
There we go.
The other big question. So this is sort of getting back to that Papert, and so a lot of the those original sort of programming language inventors, a lot of the people who have come up with a lot of the algorithms that we use on a day-to-day basis, they were interested in AI very early. And one of the great promises of AI for a long time has been, well, by studying this, we're going to learn something more about cognitive science, about how people learn and how we know things and how the brain works.
That's an interesting take. When I think of AI researchers, I don't think of AI researchers as researching AI as a proxy to researching human brain and human cognition. Like I know that people go from human cognition. Yeah.
You sort of think about it the other way around, right?
Yeah.
This might have been a big,
yeah,
it might have been bigger, maybe more of an emphasis back in the day. But I think people used to say it all the time. But AI also used to mean something else. So it's like they invented Lisp as an AI, and it's like, it doesn't match our concept of what AI means now. But it's like that was what they were thinking about, these expert systems.
So Rob, in the blog, let's dig into that. So in the blog post you put together, the play in predictive minds, right? The one that we're here to talk about. What ways do you think learning is the same between people and AI? Like you mentioned here that sort of all minds are prediction engines. Can you dig into that? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. I think that this model holds a lot of weight. So the model that this blog post and this paper are sort of founded on is this predictive processing model of thought and cognition. And the basic idea is that sort of almost everything that the mind is doing is prediction. They've got this really interesting like when you move your hand, it's like you're predicting really hard that your hand is going to be in that other place and the same circuitry that does the prediction is the one that does the action, and it's just like this sort of meet in the middle of like top-down prediction and then bottom-up like sensory perception that's correcting the like what the prediction was based on like what you're sensing. And this, I think, maybe before we actually dove into the recording, Brian was mentioning that this predictive processing model has like some really interesting explanations for a bunch of things. So it has a lot to say about like what is a psychedelic doing to your mind? It's like, well, it's messing with this like update mechanism from your perceptions to your top-down predictions in this interesting way.
Yeah. I was digging, actually, now that you brought that up, so that research has been fascinating for me to read. And when I saw your stuff come through, I was like, oh wow, this is so related. My understanding of it from what I read is that like what the psychedelics actually do is stimulate neurons that make them more likely to fire. So it's actually increasing excitability, and so neurons are actually sharing information more with other cells, and the model then becomes more fluid and dynamic. So you become more sensitive to like incoming sensory information, and you're basically, your brain is receiving all these extra error signals constantly, and it's like constantly having to update. So it enables you to explore novel states and think that your cat is able to talk to you. But like when I think about that in terms of an LLM, I'm like, well, how do we do we even want to? And how would we push an LLM to do that? Right? Is that like messing around with the softmax layer? I don't know. Like how does this work?
Yeah.
Let's make sure we define terms too. LLM is
those are large language models, like all of
There we
these
go.
exciting new things like the ChatGPT. And I think like that point that Brian's making about like what's the operation that a psychedelic performs in your brain? It's like maybe there's an analog somewhere in like how we think about LLMs. And I think that like my like right analogy for like what that's doing is like raising the temperature, and it can like sort of escape from those like highest confidence predictions and like explore the space of things that are maybe a little bit less likely because maybe you're in a rut, maybe your mind is in some sort of overconfident areas, and psychedelic would sort of help you escape from some of those ruts or places where you're overconfident by like lowering the confidence you need in order to make some prediction.
Yep.
It's kind of funny that we in folks are using LLMs, ChatGPT, all those. Whenever the LLM starts getting things pretty wrong or like weird, I think people call them hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because they're just getting it wrong. Like in programming speak, we'd be like, that's a bug, that's an error, that's a mistake, whatever. But of course, because we're comparing it to kind of cognition, it's a hallucination. Which also makes it like seem like it's more okay. But it's just you got it wrong, guys.
Right, and
sure
that's also
seems more okay to me.
Well, it's also what people do.
Yeah, true.
It's like we'll hallucinate things. We have false memories.
Deja vu is a thing.
Yeah.
Rob, to come back to your post here, you grabbed a quote from another article that says, "We propose that play is a behavior in which the agent, in contexts of freedom from the demands of certain competing cognitive systems, deliberately seeks out or creates surprising situations that gravitate towards sweet spots of relative complexity within the goal of resolving surprise." So basically, you say here, play is about creating and resolving surprising situations. Like that, like if that to me is a key aspect of the LLMs and how they train themselves, that to me seems exactly what's happening a lot in a lot of great classrooms. Is that how you're thinking about it as well?
Yeah, just for the listener, I've got this blog post that summarizes this paper from I think 2022 on play in predictive minds, a cognitive theory of play. And this is one of those things that the predictive processing model has something to say about. It's like, what is play? What is going on in the brain, and like how do we come up with an explanation that makes sense for all of these different behaviors? And I think that Brian, that comparison to like what is the LLM doing in when it's does it seek out and resolve novel situations in order to learn faster? I don't think that LLMs actually exhibit any kind of behavior like that. But I think that one of the interesting findings is that trying to like create a training data set that has more opportunities for surprises does actually like increase the like learning rate of those. Like as you're trying to train, it's like actually having those surprises is really good.
And that's true for curriculum. That's true for any learning environment, right? Like what you're trying to do, like in the beginning phases of a curriculum, often you're just trying to like, input the base level of how you do something. But later on, you need to actually trick people up so that they recognize there are novel situations in which the things that you learned aren't true.
For sure. And that's like one of the things that you do when you design a curriculum is you've got some core cases. You gotta make sure that students get that sort of that base down, and then you've got to introduce some edge cases or some surprises or something that has that like thing that's like, oh, why does it work that way? It's
what makes you think. Yeah.
Right. And there's the sense of that curriculum, like the experience of a curriculum like that feels a lot like play. It's like, oh my gosh, this thing it makes it so different. It's a counterexample to all of these things that you've been seeing so far.
So as you're designing curriculum at Kibo now, are you thinking about these surprising situations? Are you thinking about like how many cycles of training that I need to, train the parameters of the human mind on? Like how has this changed your thinking about curriculum?
Yeah, I definitely like ask myself that kind of thing. Like, okay, how many params does like the brain have? How much training data do you need in order to like recognize some of these things? And I don't think I'm actually like cashing those out into like concrete, like here's how many examples I should show to students, or making those kinds of guesses. But I definitely think about how to create sort of novel and surprising situations for students.
Do you have an example of a time you've been able to make something kind of surprising purposefully? I find building purposeful surprise sometimes pretty difficult in curriculum design without it feeling contrived.
Yeah, I guess one that comes to mind, there's like a puzzle that we do for students as they're like applying to the, we have a free 5-week Python course, and there's like a puzzle that they do as part of the application where they're doing some like decoding to find a secret message. And most of the surprise there is that like you can do these things and it transforms this sort of gobbledygook string into like a real message. I think that just like the idea that a computer can do that is maybe surprising, but it feels like a sort of playful acting as a detective. So that sort of play aspect is part of it.
Yeah, I think often what you can even just do is like the common mistakes that people make, setting them up for it is a level of surprise that is a like, relatively easy thing to do in a curriculum. Most people will misunderstand this in this way, or some people will at least. So let's try to see how many people we can trip up on that.
Yeah.
So that they don't make the error in the real world.
I imagine LLMs also just provide a very cool AI, API, extra key.
Too many acronyms.
Interesting API that shows like effectively just like shock and delight very quickly. And this would be like when I was doing curriculum 10 years ago, it was all about location stuff. Like it would be like find all the restaurants near you and you would actually figure them out. Like that's pretty cool. Now, you can do something similar. You can feel surprised by how good the results are. And it just brings motivation, right? I mean, I think we had talked about in a previous podcast, we talked about one of my favorite things, like the hype lecture before like a difficult topic. You have something that's like not educationally beneficial. Just get excited, guys. This is going to be great. Right. Who's excited? And I feel like AI can kind of bring some of that hype lecture stuff as well, which is fun.
Yeah, I thought it was a great episode. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. I think that one's motivation, I think is the keyword in the title.
Yeah, motivation.
Yeah, I think. Do you think so? I guess just to call out what Joe's noticing is that like AI as curriculum content, it's like this is the subject of what we're going to study. I think is really exciting. It's also something that's going to be really relevant to students. It's like this is changing the world. It's changing the world really fast. and we need to teach it to our students so that they're ready, and then they know that this is going to be something that's central to what they're going to do in their careers. So I think that yes, it's a great hook. It like motivates, whether it's APIs or any other like interesting concept. I think it's great for that. But I think it's also like a worthwhile end goal in terms of like learning outcomes for students.
100%.
This is a question I'm like still even developing. I'm not even sure I'm asking it correctly. It's like, I have the beginnings of I've always thought of writing in the classroom as sort of a exercise for developing logical thought. If I recall correctly, at Flatiron, we actually saw that like that was the writing samples was a really great way to see if somebody's going to be successful in the program.
Yep.
And what I'm trying to think through these days is what does it mean to even think if the tool can write for you, right? Like, what does this do to thought? Right? Like if AI is writing everything, like it's writing almost half my email. Well, actually it's just like, hey, here's the email. Can you make it nicer for me? Like, have you gone down that pathway at all of thinking about AI as a writing assistant and how that's going to change thinking?
I love how Brian just like leads us into our next hour-long conversation. This is not a small question.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really interesting question, and I guess there's two angles. Like, one is just like, how are we thinking about AI and writing for our students right now? And then there's this other question of like, okay, writing as thinking, and like, what does this even mean? So I guess one, I think that like students struggle a lot with dialect and with like putting things in the form that is sort of expected in this like, there's this like set of expectations around like professional business communication around exactly like how you should express yourself. And students like typically like their habituated like mode of communication is like not that. And the like LLM is like really, really good at that. It's like it generates professional seeming writing, very nice, very polite, very appropriate. And so it's just like if the student like can help use the tool to like reshape the writing, then tends to be a positive. It's also like one that helps them learn like, oh, actually here's how I would say this in this other dialect. I think I mean we encourage students to use tools like Grammarly. It's just like you should have something that double checks the way that you've written things. There's students who will we've now like given them a lot of explicit instruction, like, by the way, just so you know, if you type in all caps, it sounds like you're shouting. That's like how it's going to be read. There's like a lot of tips like that where it's just like if someone never gets that feedback, they'll just never know, and so they'll continue to do that indefinitely. And they don't know that it like comes across that way.
Brian, is that why you always use all caps when you write to me? That's fine.
I love caps. I send Diddy actually italicized caps just to make him think.
Italicized caps. I don't even know what that means.
It's bold every other letter.
Super angry. Super angry. Sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
Anyway, there's just like I think that the LLMs and just like generally writing tools are really, really helpful for that. And the more that students actually like just engage with that and the easier it feels, I think that the better they'll get.
Yeah.
But I'm speaking more generally just about like, because your blog post, which I think is amazing, play in predictive minds. Like, what is this going to do to our minds that the AI can, like, I don't have to struggle with a paragraph anymore. And I feel like that's where a lot of my learning is, like my ability, if I have an ability to think logically, it's come from having to construct essays and writing and responses and things like that. I don't know. I mean, this is just a question that I can't answer. So I ask people smarter than me, and that's why I'm asking you.
I think that people are still going to be thinking. I think that the tool is going to do some of your thinking for you. And I think that like is true, that externalizing some of your thought ends up acting as a crutch. But I think that it's also a superpower in some ways. It's like if you couldn't write, you also couldn't think in some ways. If you couldn't use a calculator, it's like there's just some thoughts that you couldn't have. And there's some like forms of like, whether it's socially like externalizing some of your thoughts, like having a conversation like this, like some of the reason for me to be here is like, well, I'm going to say things and hear things and think things that I wouldn't if I wasn't here. I think GPT is going to offer that same kind of experience as well, where you're going to think things that you wouldn't because it would be too slow for you to type it out. And so you wouldn't get to the next thought if you were to sit down and like spend an hour trying to craft that essay. And so I think that sort of socially mediated condition, cognition, where it's like, well, now social can mean like still by yourself, but like also with ChatGPT. I think that that's going to happen a lot too. And my hope is that students don't disengage from that thinking process, that they don't let the tool do all of the thinking and like sort of just like skim with their eyes, but instead are like very active participants and like really, really partners with the tool. And then that elevates their thinking rather than just weakens it. That's my hope, at least.
I would add to that. Well,
My
I'd
hope
add
as
to
well.
To that hope that the teachers also see the danger in allowing students to go that direction, because I think a lot of students would love to have to spend less time writing. Sure, yeah, why not have this thing created for me? But you need the teacher's guidance to help the student understand that there's a moment when that is appropriate. I mean, people use virtual assistants. They have live people that they offload work to, and those people do some of the thinking for them. And I would argue that that's not that different a situation than using generative AI. So we're okay with you doing it if there's a human involved. We should be okay with you doing it if there's a machine involved. But when that happens, if I'm hiring someone as my virtual assistant, I better know what good work looks like, because it's going to look like my work and I'm going to get judged on their work. And so it's the same situation where if I don't know how to write well and I hire a virtual assistant who knows how to write but might not know how to write well, I'm going to look bad. So I better know how to write well. I think that's the thing where we really need the teachers, the people building the curriculum, running the educational programs, to understand the power of this thing and also the peril of using this in place of human thinking. And yeah, we can't let it go that way where it's just fine to use this for anything in place of your own thinking, because like Brian said, that is how you formulate thoughts.
Yeah. I think actually software is like a domain where we've got a ton of experience with this kind of like issue. So one of the things I was listening to, I should look up what podcast it was, but I was listening to somebody else who was also like a programming teacher, and one of the things that they mentioned was that students will frequently, when they have this is like old school autocomplete or like code completion tools, they would rely on that too heavily, and then it would generate a bunch of nonsense, and then they would be like, well, why doesn't it work? But I think we've got all of these tools that help us think when we're coding. It's like, I cannot run the type checker in my head. It's like, compiler? No. I really need this external tool to help me think as I'm trying to build this software. And it can be really good, but also you can't only ever be a compiler driven developer. You can't only ever be like an error checker driven developer, because at some point you still need to be the one who's driving sort of where this code is going. And I think that still remains true, even if the tool is doing even more thinking. Hopefully, it allows us to say, okay, actually, by the end of programming 1, you got to be able to write even more complicated programs because this tool is even better. Like higher level languages like enable you to do more things. It's like if our introductory programming language was C instead of Python, there is no way that we would have students calling HTTP APIs in the first class. That would be crazy. It's like doing that in C is just so much work, and students wouldn't be ready for it. But changing the tools means that you change the level that students can operate at. And I expect that GPT is going to have, or this broad set of AI tools is going to change that level. Exactly how, I don't know yet, and that's where the excitement and mystery, and
we're all waiting to find out.
It's emergent.
Exactly.
I'm actually kind of curious here. One of the things I've been thinking about you a lot lately, whether you know it or not. I'm kind of, I love Rob. And anybody who's listening, if you have the opportunity to work with or learn from Rob, it is it's always number one on my list. Like if Rob offered me a job at Kibo, I'd be running over there. I'm curious how you're thinking about injecting these tools into the program design at Kibo, because many people, nobody might know this, but Rob was actually my one-on-one JavaScript instructor. He and I were playing around with one-on-one instruction for a period of time. And it was one of the best learning experiences that I've ever had. Rob is an amazing teacher. I've recently been using ChatGPT to brush up on Python, and I've noticed like two major differences. One is, it will tell me the answer, where Rob used to torture me with questions until I figured it out myself. But the other thing that I've noticed that is missing, and I couldn't tell at first, I was like, something else is off. But you actually cared about me. You like took the time to think about Brian, the student, and guide me through. And I'm wondering, is like, are you thinking about adding? I mean, it's a great thing for curriculum, right? But are you thinking about these things as like extra tutors or anything like that? And how are you thinking about those gaps that that still exist between the LLM and the teacher?
Yeah, no, I think this is a really key question for us. So I think that I put it into three buckets. One was that like AI as learning objectives, like a thing to teach about,
Right.
and then there's one that's sort of like tools for us, like help me write this lesson content. But I think that this is this question of like, how do we use LLMs for students? How can this be a tool for students to learn better? I think this is the one that's really worth digging into. And I think that, as you say, at least right now, the tool can't pick up on a bunch of other contexts. It can't make inferences. It can't sort of reject your prompt and say, actually, you're frustrated right now. Let's talk about something else. Or I'm just going to give you the answer right now because this point you just need to get the win. Or actually, for this one, I want you to dig in and keep trying this because I actually know that you've got this. But it doesn't have that model of a teacher. Yeah.
I like that after talking about you being my one-on-one teacher, all of your examples are frustration of the student.
It's really common.
Reasonable.
It's really common
There's
in learning
no
to
connection
code.
there. There's no connection.
No,
but Rob, actually, that's a really good point, and I think it's the mark of a good teacher is understanding what the student needs and understanding what kind of motivation to develop versus when you need to step in and give them a quick win. Do you think look, anything's possible at this point? Can AI accomplish anything like that? If say Brian wrote prompts to say, act like Rob Cobb, which anyone who knows ChatGPT knows you can't do that, but act like an expert teacher. Don't just give me the answer. Um, make sure that I understand things by testing me with questions, whatever those things are. Could you set up an experience, do you think, that would mirror that, or do we need that human element still?
yeah, I think this is a really good question. So the reference that I point people to when they've got this kind of question, I think the like person who is maybe like writing this down the best right now is Ethan Malik over at the One Useful Thing Substack blog, and I think that for any of those specific kinds of interactions, you can set up the ChatGPT to do a pretty good job at acting as a coach or a Socratic instructor, or as like tell me the answer or generate some quizzes for me. I think that there's got to be something that bridges the gap, whether it's empowering students to know that they need to use all of these different sort of like hats that the AI can wear, or an instructor saying, actually, right now you need the answer. Like go to this GPT, sort of version that is like been prompted to do the specific thing that you need right now. There's some decision making that needs to happen to like go to the right prompt. But I think that if the prompt is good, it can do that coaching. It just has to. You sort of have to ask it. Whereas a teacher would say, I don't know, I can recognize which mode I need to be in. And I think that one of the things that we've got to think about is how do we empower our students to use these things the best ways. And some of it is going to be arming them with that like specific knowledge, like, listen, you're an emotional creature. You're not just a thinking thing. And you need to ask when you're stuck, like you need to ask the thing to be a coach for you and to help you feel better before it just tells you the answer and like gives you the whatever Python snippet that you need in order to solve your homework. And it can do all of those things, but it can also, you've got to have some of that agency and ownership of your learning to take advantage of the best ways that these tools can help.
I think my new LinkedIn subtitle is not just a thinking thing. So there's
I think that's the title of this episode, actually.
Not
exactly.
Rob Cobb, not just a thinking thing.
I think that might be it.
So to pull back the Rob, like how are you thinking about introducing these things into the pedagogy at Kibo School? Is it just as like an instructional tool that as Joe mentioned, you can use it as like the new API that's fun to use, or like, are you going to integrate it in any of the sort of instructional or tutorial aspects?
Yeah, so I think at least the thing that we know that we're gonna do, just like we train students, we teach students to use Git and GitHub, because it's like, well, these are the tools of the trade. You've got to learn them, and they're also so it's like, practically speaking, this is how you're going to interact with a lot of the curriculum. I think in the same way, a lot of these AI tools will just have to get baked in, and so we just like have to. Yeah, you're gonna set up your API key so that you can use the latest model or whatever, and so we just have to tell students, like, you should set up this tool. Probably that means Cursor, Copilot in VS Code, and maybe also having the chat. Whether that's the keeping up with the developers in the space is really hard, but the Copilot chat is pretty interesting. And then just like the raw ChatGPT is always like pretty good.
So you've had this experience in boot camps where you're able to iterate very fast on the curriculum, right? Something like ChatGPT comes out while you're at Flatiron, and you go, "Oh, okay, in 2 weeks we're starting a new cohort. Cool, we'll figure out a way to work this in." How does iteration on the curriculum work at Kibo? And is there anything that you've been able to take from the boot camps that you've worked at to bring in there?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I think about a lot, and we definitely do a lot of iteration on the curriculum. We have like this retro that will run after each course, and then we'll bring all of those insights and we'll say, okay, let's rewrite this course for the next time that we do it. I think that the big advantage that boot camps have is that their iteration cycle is really, really fast. It's like you get another cohort immediately after this one ends, and like the time between starts is pretty short. So for us, it's like, yeah, it's 9 months since we've had a cohort take this class, and that means that like the iteration on this class is just like, it's much slower. I think that some of the advantages that we have are that there's a lot of classes that we're teaching, and we can sort of draw these insights between the classes, and so that it doesn't quite make up for not having quite as fast an iteration speed, but it at least lets us sort of glean those insights in a way that's a little bit more robust. It's like, oh, okay, this wasn't just this class; it was actually across all of the classes. We've also had a playground, which is sort of for testing new curriculum, which is this 5-week class, which we run more frequently. Nice. It's been a way for us to test out different ideas about how to market this class, exactly how to teach, what curriculum is effective. So we've tried new things each time we run that class.
I'm really curious, how did you end up at a 3-year program? Because you and I spent a lot of time together trying to figure out how long should a coding education be. And I know Joe Burgess would say always 15 weeks, never needs to be longer. 15 weeks is all you need to learn for coding. But like, how did Kibo arrive at 3 years? Like, was that partially the students that are coming in? Is that an accreditation issue? Like, where did 3 years come from? I have to ask.
So I think it's in part an accreditation issue. So the accreditation regime that we're under is the like European credit transfer system, and they're like very, very particular about the number of hours that students spend. And so just like practically speaking, it's very hard to do a bachelor's degree faster than 3 years. Just because like students have to have a certain amount of like hours in each class, and they also they have some guidelines around like how many simultaneous hours you can be enrolled in, and so it's sort of like as fast as we can go. I think one of the things that's like very recognized in the bootcamp space is that the shorter the program is, the better. It's cheaper, which is a lower cost for students. It means that they're out of the rest of their life for shorter time. They can just like get into the workforce, which is, at least for bootcamps, the destination for students, as fast as possible. And so as short as you can go while still giving students all of the tools that they need in order to get the right outcome is sort of like, that's one of the guiding principles. So I think that's some of the answer. There's a lot more context in any decision, but
ultimately I think Rob points on the main reason is 3 years, which is that's probably the least amount of time you can do and still be accredited.
Yeah.
within some reasonable bounds.
in this particular under this accreditation regime.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also incredibly affordable. I'm curious how that price, I'm looking at the website, it's $6,000 for a 3-year bachelor's program, which is unheard of in the US. Is that the going rate for that kind of program in the areas of Africa that you're offering this, or is this undercutting the competition there?
Yeah, it's a tricky question just because defining like what the like right comparison group is a little bit murky. It's like compared to other boot camps, we're much cheaper for a longer term degree. So like your like cost per day is much lower than like semicolon or decagon or alt school.
Right.
The other point of comparison is a traditional university, and the public schools in Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria are cheaper than us by a considerable degree. And so that's, if we're thinking of that as our primary competition, then that's it's like we're still more expensive, and so we've actually still got we're figuring out a lot of what to do on the financing end to make it like truly affordable to students. Yeah, the goal is that it's affordable, like within reach for a middle class African family. The sort of our big push right now is for a deferred tuition, effectively a student loan that covers up to 90% of students' tuition while they're in the program, and then they pay it back afterwards.
Nice.
So on that point, how does Kibo think about its interaction with the job market? So, a lot of times a boot camp will have a job guarantee, but as an accredited bachelor degree program, are you thinking along that lines as well, or like how does the job market play into the program?
It's a great question. One, we go to employers as we're thinking about like what should we include in the curriculum, and this is like very similar to I think a lot of universities do it, but boot camps do it especially well. I think is to just go ask like what are the skills that our students need, and a lot of the sort of maybe interesting and counterintuitive finding from that is that students really need soft skill development. And so their writing skills, their reading skills, like, can you write an email? Can you like attend a meeting on time? Just like all of these things that, you sort of take for granted, especially in the bootcamp world, because people often have some other white collar work experience. Those are things that students really, really need to excel at. And so we've got a whole part of the curriculum that's focused on developing those skills. So I'd say that's one interaction with employers, just like going and asking them. The other piece that we're doing that I think is, not new in the face of the world, but one of those innovations that we're trying to draw from really excellent higher ed programs is that we've got internships that are baked into the 3-year degree. So after the first year and then after the second year, students get this industry experience term. So our first class is we were actually doing some like matching stuff just before this call. So they're gearing up for their internships. And the idea is that they go and take what they've learned in the classroom and apply it to real world projects, so that they like really see that connection. It's like, okay, that stuff that I learned, it's really real. And they get that feedback from professional mentors. They build their resume and their network. And it gives us a little bit of a sense of like, okay, how well are students going to do when they go and they take these same resumes and apply for another internship next year and then jobs once they graduate. So our expectation is that it's like if you're graduating and you've done 2 internships where you're working on a real world project, and we've got these relationships with employers, and you've got a network of people who are going to be willing to go to bat for you, students shouldn't have any trouble finding a job.
I mean, that's also why you have to make the course a bit longer, I imagine, right? Is to cover, you have much more to cover than a person who already has an undergraduate degree in an adjacent field, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So we get a lot for free in the bootcamp space. Yeah, I think one of the differences, bootcamps typically target people who are career switchers, not all the time, but this is sort of the modal student in a bootcamp is like 26, has got a bachelor's degree and is switching from a career as a whatever barista and wants to go into software development. And the student that we're trying to design the program for is maybe we'll get some career switchers who want to tag on a bachelor's degree to their like existing experience, but we really want the degree to work for students who are coming out of secondary school who are 17, 18.
That's amazing. I love that ambition, Rob.
It's so cool that you're in this place where you get the chance to figure out how to shape this program and where this comes into play and what are the goals? What are you trying to accomplish for these students? So just hats off to you for building this thing and running this thing. It sounds like an amazing program, and thank you for sharing some of that with us and your thoughts on AI. We'll make sure to put links to Kibo, but also to your blog and some of the things that you've referenced in the episode notes so people can continue to learn. But Rob, thank you so much for joining. This was really a pleasure.
This was so much fun. Really, really fun to think about all this stuff with you guys.
Awesome.
Good to see you, Rob.
Miss you, Rob.
Great to get all kinds of just love from Brian. Love you, Brian.
I wish
Rob is one of my favorite people to ever work with. Everybody should go join.
I wish the
Kibo
listeners
School.
could see Brian's face. He's just glowing. He doesn't always glow when I talk to Brian, but I think that's because of the all caps and italics thing too. So.
Rob is one of my top 3 favorite teachers of all time.
That's great.
Who's taught me anything, and one of my favorite people to work with. So it's great to have you on, man.
It's so fun to chat with each of you.
Very good. All right. Well, Rob, again, thanks for joining, and folks, thanks for listening. That's all for now, and always keep learning.
Did you learn something just now? Get the full episode of Ways We Learn wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, we'd love to get your rating or review.